Today I just wanted to do a quick overview on some of the psychological dynamics that can underlie a 12th house experience, and then some of the behaviors that can either be observed from the person or the people in their lives as a result of this. So in astrology, the 12th house is known by many names. Probably alongside Saturn and Pluto, it is one of the most maligned and misunderstood. And this is largely because, like, in traditional astrology, it was way more like black and white defined what was malevolent and benefic, and the 12th house got put under a malefic house, and it was resigned to titles like the house of self undoing. But there's two meanings to self undoing, and there is the undoing that happens here as a part of the unraveling of the self in from the ego, the identity. The 12th house will make an individual lose a good sense of self and the direction that comes with it. It's all kind of lost at sea. And then there are the acts of self undoing that emerge as a symptom of this or of resisting this. So this will just apply to the 12th house planets in general, and then in more videos I can go in depth into each of the planets. So like when acting alone, the 12th house represents a secret portion of the self. So whatever planets are making an aspect to the 12th house will adopt part of this private nature, but they'll still demand an outlet. So the 12th house creates a lot of psychological conflict within the person. It's really important to have a look at the chart and see what planets are aspecting the 12th house as it will also show how these archetypes reveal themselves, because the 12th house will demand secrecy and privacy. So as a result, this psychologically creates a secretive person who values their private life, or maybe their private lives. As a result, they may have certain parts of themselves or practices that are completely hidden from the people in their lives. And while there are certain conditions with the 12th house that can make being alone a very daunting and harrowing process, it's more common for 12th house planets to produce a person who is private by nature. They generally prefer to be reclusive. They don't like to be intruded on. So in the 12th house, we have the healing bath, but it's also the site of violent psychic storms. So just as in the myth, Neptune, so Neptune is the ruler of Pisces, and Pisces is the ruler of the 12th house, would appear as calm and tranquil seas. He could also generate the sea storms of the centuries. So this archetype as being part of this individual's inner life, and what they could describe as almost as volatile and almost violent changes of scenery within. And this will likely be activated by different forces depending on what planet is here. So like Mars in the 12th house could have sensitive points just hidden all over them like landmines, with no sort of idea who or what will send one off. Well, Mercury in the 12th house could experience like sudden onslaughts of dark, depressing and repressed thoughts and self-destructive thinking patterns that just seem to break a silence without warning. So in traditional astrology, the water houses, so the 4th, 8th and the 12th houses, represent the realms of deep psychological transformation. This is where we encounter the mysteries of our inner worlds, and these houses are containers of ancient memories, and they carry the consciousness that connects us to the spiritual realm and ultimately like those imaginative realms of existence. So people with 12th house planets, their life will often feel like an ongoing psychological journey inward, a voyage within. They carry a profound connection to the collective unconscious, as Jung represented with water. So they are a reservoir of spiritual wisdom, shadow material, and ancestral memories. So It is from here in the psyche that the wounded healer archetype is found and activated. And this will be the most prevalent archetype that we find with 12th house people. They will represent this wounded healer, and it will emerge through their unique ability to access what is hidden, unseen, and incomprehensible, and it will be used to heal others. But they know that this gift, it comes with a curse. So we could describe the 12th house as a realm of dissolution. It dissolves ego, it blurs boundaries, and it forces these people to confront hidden aspects of themselves. So planets in the 12th house will always suggest a very deep inner experience that we can't really articulate with language. Instead, it will manifest through emotion, art, dreams, intuitive knowing, those kind of mystical, conceptual realms. So 12th house planets can make a person feel like they're existing in two worlds simultaneously. So we have the visible, the material, and this invisible, unseen. So there's a dual state of existence here, and it will obviously leave a feeling of disconnection or lethargy or feeling overwhelmed or confusion about where their energy is actually being dispensed, because they can feel so tired because all this activity in the 12th house is being carried out in invisible realms, and then they can feel depleted when it comes to having enough energy to put into this world. And obviously those energies are not compatible either. So it's going to be a lot more draining when it's produced and expressed on this plane as well. So psychologically, we could have a profound sense of dispossession, a feeling of exile, like being an outsider looking within, someone who's observing life instead of really participating in it. Another problem is that these weak boundaries create a porous identity that is very easily influenced by the presence of others. So their self-concept can be very labile as a result. There is problems with boundaries that are visible and invisible, and they can feel it too. They can sense it as well. They are unconscious absorbers of the emotions, fears, and desires and terrors and the secret, the secret dynamics going on within that person. They're taking it all in. So that's why being alone is the oldest remedy for the 12th house. Seclusion is a form of therapy that allows them to process and be aware of what emotions and what accompanies them, what belong to other people and what actually belongs to them. So it's part of the 12th house process that demands the establishment of boundaries. Boundaries have to be actively implemented or ignored at their own peril. So the wounded healer here will be activated by the 12th house experiences of loss, solitude, and self-confrontation with the wounds, the hardships within, the parts within that they've kept secret from everybody else, the things that they've suffered that have been the wounds where wisdom has entered. So emptiness and longing are 12th house themes. So, for instance, the son being a paternal figure may feel like a sensing loss of a father figure, or the godlike father figure that will take care of them. Venus here could feel like a loss of the part of them that can feel and accept and appreciate love. So instead, we have what can feel where the 12th house archetype and planet is meant to be like a void. And this is an internal space that cannot be filled by anything external. It has to be filled by reconnecting with the divine, that divine archetype within them, that they have to go inward to find. So this is why that alone time is also so important. That emptiness, is not a flaw. It's a tool for them to create the altar where they can accept these divine life forces once again. And it forces a spiritual healing through introspection and reconnecting with the most ancient part of themselves. These healing practices can only happen in solitude for 12th house people. So being alone is not a punishment. It's the place where a sanctuary is being built. And it's a place where the divine can speak directly to them. Though the psychological difficulties that come as a part of this, and while people are going through this process or not aware of what it is, the 12th house can feel like an imprisonment, and it will feel like a part of the person is locked away, or like they're locked away if these lessons are resisted. People here cannot avoid the internal work and looking within, or they'll be trapped in these cycles of loneliness, addiction, which is a 12th house theme in some way. So not only addiction to substances, but this can be like addiction to love, addiction to relationships. These are patterns of self-sabotage that underlie what are really resources that offer profound renewal. And it's a house of letting go, self-undoing. Let go of that self that they no longer need. Surrender to these higher forces, and allow for these cycles of loss and rebirth that are essential to this healing process. Each time they're drawn closer to their true essence. So we may even have the dark feminine archetype active in the 12th house, often appearing as a guide. She may actually be cloaked in the individual's suspicions and or projections, and she can be the savior who appears as a threat. The dark feminine here will psychologically represent the part of themselves that they are afraid to confront. This is where the shadow material buried deep within is, and it's also the source of profound wisdom and healing. So her presence reveals what is false and hollow in their lives. So she is a requirement that will lift them to that spiritual alignment, but she can often appear as a dark figure of fate, and this is because of the karmic influences that are at play here, and also the ancestral inheritances that where like past ancestors will reveal and manifest there in many different forms. So we have the healing gift in 12th house people, this wounded healer who is capable of bringing the unconscious into conscious awareness to access that spiritual sea and rehydrate the souls that suffer around them, the people that are drawn to their light of redemption. So we're often talking about people that possess a kind of extraordinary intuitive and creative abilities. These are people, when they're well developed, are able to channel these depths into the most beautiful art, music, healing, poetry. Though the 12th house demands this inner work, it requires the discipline and the discipline of solitude. None of these energies flourish well with external input. So psychologically, we have the 12th house as the wounded healer because it will compel the individual to confront the parts of themselves that are most hidden and the most vulnerable and the ones most suffering and that most in need in love. In doing that, it is able to recognize that in other people and provide what was needed to them in other people. So the 12th house strips away the illusions that are ego and identity. It allows for the vulnerability. It allows for the safe space. And what is originally painful is ultimately transformative. And it's not about this isn't a broken person. This is a wound that can be healed when the person is able to embrace these parts of themselves. So these experiences of loss and isolation and introspection are not punishments, but they're really the invitation to reconnect with the magic that is this divine sorcery within them. The wounded healer archetype reminds them, and through them reminds us, that healing isn't a destination, but it's a process, and one that they've actually undertaken with a great and silent courage and surrender and ultimate trust in a world beyond this one. So I hope that this could provide some insights for people who have 12th house planets about some of the dynamics that come apart and what could that come a part of it, and what could result in this. The 12th house chart, it can manifest in many different ways, but we are talking about a person whose just whole auric field will really hint at the existence of something greater and a secret world within that we find it very difficult to ultimately access. So it's kind of a world that only they know, and that they can try to communicate to us through creative and sensual means.